All right. Hello. Welcome, Jen Lee. We're so excited to have you with us today to talk about homeschooling. I've known Jen Lee for 10 years now, and I've met her family, and she's been homeschooling for as long as I've known her. So we asked her to come on here and just kind of share some tips and tricks for parents as we're all kind of navigating this unknown future of education. Jen, if you want to give us a little bit of a background, that would be great.
Hi. Okay, so I have 7 kids. My oldest is going to be 18 in October, and my youngest is 4. We have 5 girls and 2 boys. We've been homeschooling since the very beginning. As soon as we had our oldest daughter, we just looked at ourselves as a homeschooling family. My husband actually homeschooled in 6th and 7th grade, and he said those were the best education years of his life, and he always wanted to homeschool after that. And I said, well, and then he said, it's up to you, though, because you're the one that will be home more. And so I didn't really do a whole lot of research. I just trusted him and said, that sounds kind of cool. And we kind of dove in as soon as we had the baby. And I just started reading about it after that and living life as if we were a homeschool family. So we've been doing that ever since.
That's awesome. Great. And so like you mentioned you did a lot of research and things. So how did you do like a combination of online learning, or was it mostly just you instructing, or how did that work?
So in the beginning, we lived in North Carolina, and she, of course, because we started when she was little, I really looked at what would help her develop. I mean, like most parents, you're looking at what you can do for your toddlers and your babies to help them grow and learn. And so we were really attracted to the Montessori method of style of learning, because it involved her helping me so much and just teaching her life skills and just being like learning about her world around her, which is a very common thing for toddlers to be curious and learning about anyways. And so I just read it's been a long time, so I couldn't recap, but I do recommend the Maria Montessori book. That book she actually wrote. It's a little dry. It's not as flowery and fun as like the newer ones people have written about the method, but I loved the book and implemented a bunch of that stuff. I just came up with my own thing. We taught her to read at age 4. She was super eager, and I think we said we would buy her the stuffed animal if she read these 3 books. And she was like, I want that animal. And so she started reading. I haven't had any other children learn to read that young. But I think actually my last one right now, my 4-year-old is learning to read now. So it's kind of funny. It's like started that way and ending that way. But so we did a lot on our own until she was 8. We actually had a hard time finding some co-ops and things to join in North Carolina. A few of them that I tried to join were affiliated with churches, and they didn't agree with my religion and wouldn't let me join. So we kind of were on our own. Then we moved to Utah when she was 8, and we kind of were just trying to figure things out, didn't know anybody, and I randomly met somebody at the park who also homeschooled. We met them during the day, and we saw we were both there with their kids and nobody else around, and she introduced me to the amazing world of homeschooling in Utah, and I seriously have always called it homeschooling heaven. It's just been a delight to homeschool in this state, and kind of really incentivizes me to not go anywhere else. So
I think that's awesome that like just going to the park in the middle of the day, like that's one of the benefits.
It is. Nobody else is there.
Yeah, everything's just dead during the day when kids are normally at school, but it just seems like you have a lot more flexibility that way. And I think that's one of the benefits of what we do with online school, and it's similar when you're actually doing the homeschooling, is you create the schedule. How did you do you actually have a specific schedule that you do?
Like a routine with
like regular basis? Like what's the routine look like for you guys?
So
give us a typical day.
So it's evolved over the years because, as the kids grow and each kid has their own personality and their own strengths and weaknesses and things they're interested in, every year we start the year in prayer of what is best for this child this year and what is best for this child. So I've always homeschooled with the option of I'm willing to send them to a different school, to a public school or a private school or a charter or whatever, if that's what's best for them. So our schedule has evolved. We've gone from, I've tried very strict schedule, like a classroom thing where like at this time we have breakfast and at this time we clean up the chores and then at this time we do this. And I personally found that doesn't work for me and my personality. I never kept with it. I never kept with the schedule, the time. So I homeschool in a lot more relaxed way. The kids have things that they know that they need to do. And as long as they get them done, then I'm cool with however they want to do it. And if they want to be outside on the trampoline with their book, then I don't care. Like, I don't make them sit at a table. I actually found that makes them throw tantrums and they get all upset. And I had a kid, she's 13 now, but when she was like 8, she puked all over her binder because I was like, so you have to sit here and do your schoolwork, trying to just get her to do something that she just didn't want to do. And when I relaxed a little bit, gave her more power over where she felt like she had choice and she realized she had more control over her own education, they are a lot more happy to do all the things that we're asking them to do. I mean, the teenagers tend to give me a little bit more eye roll sometimes. If we're like, we want you to read this book, they might not be in the mood to read it, but mostly everybody does what they're supposed to because they know there's consequences if they don't. So we don't have a really strict schedule. We just kind of let them pick.
So as long as the work is getting done, that works. So I mean, I think parents have different ways of going about it. So it's interesting to hear that point of view where you're giving your kids a little bit more leeway to learn how they want to learn.
Yeah.
And it's kind of personalizing it for them. So that's interesting.
Adjusting to the personality styles, it might be that, like I know sometimes, and we've had this conversation on one of the podcasts we appeared on, but like when I'm on the phone, I typically am pacing because I can absorb and think better as I'm, moving, and you'll see me talk with my hands a lot because that's just my style. And I think it's the same for kids, sometimes movement or a quiet space alone, or maybe group work and background noise, so each individual child is going to have different learning style, different needs. And so it's great that you give them that autonomy to just say, yeah, I learn better over here, so I'm going to go do it over here.
Yeah.
So I would imagine though that would require more communication.
Yes.
Between you and your students, because I feel like it's nature for kids to want to just, maybe they're not the best time managers. So what happens when they get off, like when they get off track? Is it something that you guys just talk about on a daily basis, or like how do you keep them on the right track?
So timers are a huge help, not only for them, but for me, because I'm very spacey sometimes. Like I'll forget that I said this person is supposed to be doing this or that. Sometimes I just kind of, somebody will remind me, Mom, but you just asked me to be reading and now you're asking, and I'm like, oh yeah. So setting timers is helpful. I use them on every device. I use them on my oven, on the microwave, on my phone. I'm like, that's your timer. That's your, we used to have little timers and they broke and I haven't replaced them, but yeah. So timers helpful. We try to meet with our kids weekly for a meeting, kind of like a mentor meeting is what we call it, mentor parent meeting. And we're not pros or excellent at it all the time. Sometimes we miss it just because life gets busy, but usually on Sundays we try and meet with the kids and ask them, how did your week go? What do you think? What are you working on? What more do you have to do with that? And just figure out, and then we're able to see what their frustrations are. But another fun thing I forgot to mention is in the beginning of the year, I always meet with my kids and I say, what do you want to learn? What is interesting to you? And I make sure that they know right away that their education really is their own and it's their responsibility their whole life. And so I tell them, we'll make a list and we will put all that in there. And so I'm not as strict with, because I do plan on homeschooling, mostly, I'm not as strict with keeping up with, like, I don't look at books at the library that says, what should my third grader know? Because I I don't try and keep up with what the school system says my third graders should know, because I trust that I have a list and we'll get it all in. And I kind of just go with what the kids want. And they're just a lot happier to do the things if they knew that it was their idea.
So you just have them invest more in it. And
yeah.
I'm sure the results are a lot better too.
I have found they are.
Yeah. I mean, I like that. It's just, you know, a lot of parents in this current situation where you're, I think the difference is where, you know, you've planned on homeschooling. Mm-hmm. So this is something that you chose. And now with like everything going on with the COVID-19 pandemic and all of that, it's like some parents are just kind of like thrown into this and they're like, oh, what do I do? Or they have to keep up with what teachers are providing. That's true. That feels like a much different situation than what it is you're operating in.
It is. The advice that I've given, so, oh my goodness, I think for the past 2 weeks, I've had people call me, message me on every social media I'm on, and text me every day, hey, help me figure out how to homeschool. And I started writing a little guide because I was like, man, I'm just repeating myself, and repeating it is so much time. And I just thought, if I could just write all of my opinions or thoughts that I would tell a friend down, then I can just share it. Like, write it once, share it, you know, try and help my time. So the suggestions that I've been giving those who are choosing to homeschool right now because of the COVID mess, and then they're thinking and hoping that they can just put their kids back in school. But if so I usually ask them first when they're asking advice, I say, well, what are your long-term plans? Are you hopeful that homeschooling might be the new option? Are you planning to put your kids back in? If so, and you're not using the public school online programs, like not doing what the teachers are providing, then I usually say, you can get a list of what your kids should learn, what the school says your kids should learn this year. And then definitely use it as a guide, but I wouldn't at all put pressure on the children and tell them, you have to learn this. This is what you have to learn this year. Like, hide that from them. Do not like make them feel like there's all this pressure that they have to learn this, because as parents, you worry that you're going to fail. And a lot of that stress and worry of being like looked at as a bad parent, you don't want to project that on your kids' shoulders. And so usually I just say, find that list, but then make your own and just say, here are some ideas of some things we can learn. I thought that we could learn. What do you want to start with first? And just throw any schedule out the window as far as if your teacher would have taught that in September or November. Mm-hmm. Just say, well, what do you want to learn first? And help them pick from that list and just work through it, but help the kids feel like it's their idea and their plan, not what is like required. And because that the kids act up if they feel all that pressure, it'll be a lot harder to homeschool them.
Yeah. Totally. And I love that it goes back to that role of taking ownership and getting them excited about their education, because for students, it might not be something they pick either. You know, they might be, well, I want to be back in school, but it might not be the best solution for their family. So they're then in this situation where, hey, I have to be homeschooled. So giving them kind of that responsibility, you know, their critical thinking develops, their accountability develops, all these skills that they're learning just by making those small decisions as well. And then it's like, okay, they're learning these life lessons by having to decide, taking the ownership, and finding what they're interested in. And so for parents who maybe both are going to be working from home now, because that's probably a new thing as well, that offices might not be having employees in there again, what would you suggest for them if they can't have as much of a hands-on approach, and let's say they're doing like online learning, whether that's what the school's assigned or they choose to go to a private school online? How would you say they could kind of still stay engaged and help their kids with that while they're working as well?
So that's really tricky. I've tried working from home, even if I'm just sitting there trying to pay bills and focusing on something important, or with some of the other things that I'm pursuing. It is definitely tricky. I actually find that kids tend to, I don't know if it probably differs on different kids, and really a lot of this will be trial and error, and figuring out what works best for your family situation and your setup. Even the way your home is set up can affect the way, like right now my computer's downstairs in my room, and so if I come down here to work, I'm like, I don't hear anything going on upstairs, so it doesn't work very well. But so if you choose to go the online route, there are some options that you can, especially for the younger age. There's a few, they're started like a charter school. They'll actually pay you money to help go towards your education because the government pays them per student, like a public school. I don't know the exact details, but they'll pay you money, and you can either show them like the work that you've been doing, or some of them are set up where they give you a stack of worksheets the kids have to do and excuse me, upload. And so those programs are great, but I do find that my kids are needing my help more when they're doing online schooling because of technical issues, like, Mom, how do I do this? Or they get distracted and click on other things, or especially when they're little and they're trying to figure out how to use the mouse. So I actually prefer non-online if I'm trying to do work. I find it easier to say, we're going to do centers, and just set up different things that they need to do and say, okay, we're going to set the timer and you're going to do this for 20 minutes. And I don't know why, but kids just, it's like fun to them. It's elementary age. If you say you're doing centers, it's like, especially my homeschool kids who just, they play school. They play public school at home. Like they pretend that they're teaching and for fun. And so if I see them doing centers, they're like, oh my gosh. And they love the idea. So usually I can keep them more focused when it doesn't have to do with online schooling if I'm working.
So what kind of involvement do you have on a daily basis with like the different age levels? Like as they get older, do you find that you're less involved on a daily basis? Like they just kind of work on their own, or at what age, are they more independent?
Yeah, so we found around age 12 in our family, they tend to be a lot more independent, and they're good to focus on what they're supposed to do, and they're motivated because they do want to be able to do the fun things that they want to do. So they're very aware that if they don't get their work done, they're not going to get to have the privileges that they want, like hanging out with friends or whatever. So around 12, they usually are sitting down doing a lot more studying and book work, and reading and writing and listening to Audible or whatever without me having to really intervene. I do check on them. I do say, hey, how's it going or whatever. And usually I try and read the books that the kids are reading. It doesn't always work out that way. But if they're reading a book that I've recommended for them to read through somebody else's recommendation, then I make sure that I really trust that recommendation. But for the little ones, I'm usually pretty involved with them. Because I'm not working from home full time or anything, I usually am with them. And I usually do a lot of lessons together, like my 4 youngest. So for example, last spring we did unit studies together, which like I taught the solar system and all about the planets, and we dove into all kinds of things, constellations, all this stuff, and even did a master class. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the master class classes. They're like professionals that teach a class. You can either do a subscription or pay per month. But even my 8-year-old son took the master class by a NASA astronaut. And so we just dove in, but all of them were doing the same thing. So I could have them all involved. I didn't have to be like, oh, I'm working with him on this and work in it. It's very difficult with multiple children to be doing multiple lessons for each kid. So I usually just try and teach them all together, and then their assignments might be more difficult based on their age.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's from our point of view. We mainly focus on the older kids, middle school and high school. But coming in and trying to alleviate some of the burden off of the parents so that they're not having to give the instruction and this and that, and we have a teacher or a mentor that's assigned to them. So hopefully we can handle most of the questions on technical difficulties and stuff like that virtually.
Yeah, that's true.
To try to, eliminate some of that burden off of the parents' shoulders. But it's definitely going to be a challenge regardless if you're trying to work from home and balance that. So I think setting some boundaries and expectations, you know, and really keeping the communication open with you and your students on, you might have a meeting or you might have certain times of the day where you need to focus on work and they might have to do something that's a little bit more independent. So I think it probably varies from family to family with what type of setup is going to work, but interesting point of view from your perspective too, as a parent that's been doing this.
It takes a little less time too, where when you send them to public school and they're there until, I don't know, 2:30 or 3, in your mind as a non-homeschooler, it's easy to be like, oh my gosh, like what am I going to do with them till 3:00?
Yeah.
And I've had friends tell me, actually, we did try public school for 1 semester, and it didn't work out for various reasons, each child for a different reason. And but I've had friends say, I don't know how you homeschool. And I say, I don't know how you public school, because in my mind, the amount of time it takes me to go through the work that the kids need to do, like, hey, let's do your writing, or, you know, or make sure you get your writing done, or, okay, are you going to be reading? The little things that they have to do for their education every day takes a few hours, but it doesn't take till 3:00, unless they drag their feet and we don't start till noon or something. But it only, the amount of time it took me, maybe not everybody, because I wasn't a pro at being a public school mom, but it took me hours to help my kids with homework after school. And that was the same amount of time I was putting into my kids for homeschooling. And then we were done and we were ready to pursue hobbies and all kinds of other fun learning things that kids don't realize is educational, but it is
Learning.
So can you give us some examples of that, you know, that type of thing? Like, do you guys go to museums? Do you, like, you kind of, I mean, from what I'm gathering is you really put a lot on them. Like, what do you want to do? What do you want to learn? What are your interests? What do you want to pursue? But with all that extra time now, what are some things that you guys do or that other parents could do?
Yeah. So I think based on the activity on Facebook groups, I think a lot of families have figured out that they can find a homeschool group for their area. Now, my number one suggestion would be to look for that. Whatever search your county, your city, and even your state. There's even homeschool groups that are gigantic for the entire country. Probably any country it's legal, you could probably find a Facebook group for it if they use Facebook. So my number one suggestion would be to do that. That is a wonderful way to find out about really cool opportunities. With COVID, things slowed down. It was a little bit trickier, but usually this is typical homeschooling. Like it'll be different because of, you know, the virus, but typically you will find park days. You will find moms wanting to plan a field trip. And because you're homeschoolers, you can get a field trip price to get into, say, the aquarium and Draper. I think it's like, I don't know, like $3.50 or $4 per kid versus like 15 or whatever, if you go and you plan a field trip. So people will list that, hey, I'm planning a field trip. I need 50 kids to go. And all the moms will sign up and pay when they get there, however it's planned. So the Facebook group will be a really wonderful way to find out about activities to join. There are performing arts groups that your kids can join that are, oh my gosh, I can think of 4 theater performing arts groups just in the northern Utah area for homeschoolers that are putting on shows. They have rehearsals during the day. There's choirs. So I usually try and get my kids involved in that. They naturally gravitated towards that because my oldest daughter loves music and singing and theater. And so the rest of my kids kind of followed in that. And so we will have them be in choir. We'll have them be in a show. We'll go to museums as much as we can. If there's any kind of a pass that we can get that will get us in multiple museums, we'll look at that as a Christmas gift. We usually try and use our Christmas budget for the gifts we give the kids and plan it so that it also helps with our homeschooling year. So we usually try and plan the things to be educational. Even the money that is given to us through, like we did Harmony Ed, and they pay, and we signed up for again this year. I think they pay $1,900 per kid for elementary school kids per kid, and you send them like an Amazon wish list, and they'll purchase things for you on that wish list. And usually we plan that some of those items per kid that is for that specific child, we'll plan some of that to be given to them at Christmas. So we'll spread it out throughout the year.
Mm-hmm.
So,
interesting.
Yeah. So there's a lot of options, but Facebook will be a really great way to find all the fun activities and things you can participate in.
So then
even
the
mom's nights.
Of social, like, it's like this stigma of like, oh, you're homeschooled, you have no social life, you have no social interaction, you're awkward.
Yeah.
Like, talk on that, because that's something I think a lot of people are worried is like, if my kid's either doing homeschooling or online schooling or whatever at home, and now they're no longer going 8 hours socializing with other friends and with teachers and stuff like that,
How is it going to affect
no
them?
social skills by the time they leave high school. So you're saying that's not true then?
Oh my gosh. If I said yes to everything my kids begged me to sign up for, we would never be home. We would literally be out of homeschoolers. Like, we would never be home. I have to say no to a lot. I always kind of, when asked that question, I usually either I just ignore it and scroll past if it's online. But if a friend is like, hey, like, I'm really worried about this, I usually say, well, in public school, did you know, like, people that were socially awkward? Well, yeah. Did you know kids that were really weird? Yeah. Usually you're going to find that in any setting, even in the office, workplace, working at some big corporate job, there's going to be that really, really odd person that is just socially awkward or difficult to work with. And it's something that you're going to have to deal with. So as far as social, my kids get so much, oh my gosh, the social lives of these homeschoolers is just as active as other kids. And even my elementary age kids are always asking, can I call so-and-so? Can I talk to so-and-so? They just meet people. As long as you're not, and I think public school families who are forced to homeschool right now, with the situation, they're social people by nature, and they're not going to just hide their kids in their house and never go anywhere and never talk to anybody and not let their kids play with anybody. So kids just, I think, unless you're really locking them in your house, they're going to get their social activities.
And almost in a way, I don't know what your thought is on this, but I feel like it gives the student or the child more control over their friend groups, where they can make friends based on common interests, where when you're in school and you're trying to determine what crowd to get into. And it's like, oftentimes once you get into a crowd, certain circle of friends, you're almost kind of stuck there. And it might not always be the right crowd that you get involved with, where homeschool or online schooling or whatever, if you decide that you don't really like hanging out with somebody, well, you don't really have to then. You choose not to, and you find other people who are in a different circle of things that interest you. Do you find that to be the case?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, just yesterday, my oldest daughter was talking about her friend groups, and she said, I have like 5 different friend groups, or 4 or 5 different friend groups. I've got this group here, and we all hang out. And then I have this group here, and they're my theater friends. And I have this group I know from choir, and I have this group I know from church, and I have this, and you wouldn't get that I was public schooled my whole life, and I had one friend group all my whole high school years, and acquaintances and other people I talked to, but I didn't have a chance to have, 5 different friend groups. And then to get them all together is super easy. Like the kids are, I find, a lot more receptive to meeting new people that don't have like the same interests. We've had night game parties here with the teenagers, and they'll invite all of their friend groups, and the kids there's no drama, and they all just get along and play and hang out. So yeah, I think it gives them a lot more options. That's for sure.
I feel like that information can put some parents at ease.
I hope so.
Don't worry, just because, it's something that you hear every time you bring it up, like online learning, like, oh, you guys run an online school. Well, what do the kids do? Are they just at home all day, just in front of a screen? It's like, well, no, they actually only work on school for maybe like 3 hours a day. And now you have all this time to pursue other passions.
Mm-hmm.
So
and I think that helps develop their confidence in a huge way. When my kids are bored, I usually feel like it's maybe that they've lost interest in the hobbies that we've been helping them pursue, and we have to kind of readjust and say, okay, you've been moping around, or you've been sleeping too much, or you like, what do you want to learn about now? Like, what's your new hobby? Okay, do you not like violin anymore? That's fine. Like, what do you want to learn that will help you be excited about life?
Yeah, totally. Well, yeah, and I love that you touched on the social aspect, because a lot of the friends I've been talking to, they're very worried about COVID, and my kid's not going to wear a mask all day, and I don't want to expose that. But they're going to miss their friends, and how do we keep them socially connected so that they're not suffering? And so I love that there's so many options out there for parents to connect, and whether it's, hey, someone in my neighborhood, our kids are the same age, let's just plan to get together once a week, if they're friends, or even if they're not, just, get them together and getting them interacting and socializing and learning and gaining those new friend groups that will help them to see different perspectives as well, I think is huge also. So
yeah. Another idea is as a parent, just because if you're new to homeschooling and you don't know other homeschoolers very well or whatever, it doesn't mean that you can't start something of your own. And even if you haven't been homeschooling forever, I mean, honestly, I was just telling Angeli before this that even though I've been homeschooling for this long, I still feel like a newbie sometimes. And every homeschooler mom or parent wants friends, and they want their kids to have friends. So a lot of moms will say, hey, I'm going to start a book club, and we're going to do these fun activities, especially for the younger age. This is so fun, and they love it. We've always put our kids in a book club around age 7 to 8, and the moms, it's like run like a co-op, and the moms all take turns to hold the book club that month. And you plan the books, and it's not that hard. You just plan some books, and then you plan activities based around that book. So if you're doing Little House on the Prairie, then that month your activities might be, especially if it's in the winter, you might pour hot molasses on the snow to harden like candy. You might blow up balloons and pretend that they're the pig's bladders that they used to play with, like a balloon in the book. Like, you do these fun, silly activities that the kids relate to from the book, and they look forward to that. And then those friendships grow stronger, and they start to do other things. And that's how you get to know other moms, is if you're like just planning something like that, or asking on Facebook, does anybody have a book club my daughter can join? And nobody, even all our homeschoolers that have been doing this forever, we're here with open arms and super excited about all of the new homeschoolers out there, even if you're only planning to homeschool for a year.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Sounds like there's a great community and a lot of resources.
Really,
so parents know where to turn. If they're new, I feel like you're saying give yourself some grace and get out there, get connected. Even if you've been doing it for years, you still don't know everything there is to know. So if you feel nervous to jump in, just, join a group, get the resources you need, and you'll be just fine.
Yeah. Well, and one quote, and I wish I knew who to attribute it to, but I've heard it a lot, is that, we're all in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat. And so everybody's circumstance is going to be different, but we're all dealing with COVID. We're all confronting this. What's best for my child? How do I ensure that they're not going to fall behind or be, deprived of good social interaction that's going to help them have skills later in life? And, I think it is just going to come down to creativity and innovation. And like you said, trial and error, we're all learning this together, and finding a community of, like-minded parents for homeschool groups is great. And, taking advantage of the opportunities that are now going to be presented to all these kids that were in a public school setting, because now they're going to have time to explore their hobbies. They're going to have time to focus their energy on learning potentially what they want to do for a career. And, there's a lot of online options out there. I know something that's big for us, we recognize the value in those learning opportunities that happen outside the classroom. So if they're involved in theater or music or sport, we can award them credit for that too, so that they're also essentially staying on track with school, but they're learning those good skills, and they're being able to pursue their passion and just get excited about education again. And that's part of the reason Sarah and I founded Mountain Point Academy, was because we want kids to be excited about education. We want them to recognize the value in, hey, you're doing all these things already where there's all this learning that's taking place. Let's connect with you, make sure you can get credit for that, and we see the value in that as well. So it's going to be kind of an interesting dynamic as, homeschool and all this comes into play with the public education side of things, and just how more, well-rounded a student potentially can be as they learn, these social skills. Because I think parents have the opportunity too to, hey, we got to plan out our groceries for the month because we don't want to go out more than once a month to the store, so let's sit down, budget, let's meal plan. Hey, there's a life skill right there.
Yep.
Your kids are using those critical thinking skills, and there's all these opportunities that will be presented, and it's kind of exciting. I mean, I know it's scary and uncertain, but there's also these good opportunities that will be presented to kids as well.
Yeah, totally. I think it's very important that also anybody jumping into the homeschooling or online schooling at home, which is, I kind of just lump it all together because you really are, is important to give yourself space to learn and to not be so hard on yourself, because your frustrating days, if you're like, this isn't working, my kids are fighting me, and it's just like, you have to understand that even the experienced homeschool moms have days like that. And kids, because of the adjustment, actually, it's said, if you're going to leave, a lot of people have said that if you're going to leave public school and homeschool for good, if that, usually they say that you need 1 month of deschooling, detox per year that child was in public school to get them used to, which is crazy, because if your kid has been in school for 4 years, you don't have 4 months, especially if you're planning to put your kids back in school next year, you don't have 4 months to detox that child. But be aware that it does take time for kids to get used to things. And so show them how much fun their education can be. There's always time to catch up. Once they get situated and used to learning at home, they'll start flying through things. And so these next few months, the more you let them choose what they're going to do, and the more relaxed you get about not being hard on yourself if it's a hard day, then the easier, your school year will go. If you jump in trying to do everything super, expect the kids to behave the way that they were at school, then this can be a lot more hard.
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head. If you're expecting to be perfect as a parent, you're putting that out there for your kids, and then they're going to feel the stress of you not feeling perfect and feeling inadequate, and then it will kind of be reflected back. And so I think it does boil down to just those honest conversations of, hey, look, this is new for all of us. We're going to learn together. Help me help you. And, it'll foster even those greater relationships between a parent and child connection as well.
Yeah. You just said something that we're going to learn together. That's another huge thing. And there are a few homeschool philosophies that really push on this and that we agree with and have tried to act on, is that children are a lot more likely to be excited about their education if they see their parents showing that their own education is important. If you are wanting your child to read, get a book and read. Yeah. If you're wanting your child to practice their handwriting, go get a fancy pen and sit down and practice your handwriting. I learned calligraphy for that reason. I wanted to write pretty because it looked pretty, but I also had a few children that didn't want to work on their handwriting. And so I started sitting down with a calligraphy pen and or, brush markers or whatever. And I started learning how to write pretty, and they got more interested in it. So a huge thing is, if you're having kids push against you about something, add that into your life without telling them, look, mommy's doing it, you have to do it, but just do it. Like, just say, I'm reading right now. This is my reading time. I would like you to go and get your book and do your reading time too, or don't interrupt me during my reading time. So kids will watch how you behave. And if you're just always watching TV, which I'm not saying that, everybody's doing that, but if they want to do what you're doing. So if they see that the education is important to you, even in your 30s and 40s or 20s, youngins, then they'll start to catch on that is fun and it's not just boring.
Yeah.
That's great advice.
That is great advice. So awesome. Well, Jen, you mentioned you created this awesome resource for parents, so you don't have to continually word vomit and say all of it over and over again. So where can they find this awesome resource to give them some tips?
So I actually it's not finished. I've been working on it. It should be done this week. And how about I just send you a link and then you can share it.
Perfect.
It will, just for ease, because I already have quite a lot of people wanting it, I will probably just have it on a landing page where they can just put their email in and then it'll automatically send it to them. This is not a business I've started. That's just the only way I've figured out the quick, easiest way to share it. Yeah. So I'll send you a link and then you guys can share.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It was very enlightening. We appreciate all the tips and tricks, and I know that other parents will appreciate it too. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks,
You're
Jen.
welcome. Thank you. You guys have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.